My parents chose my brother's award over my car crash. Now they want my savings for his fraud scandal. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm sharing a truly wild story about family, loyalty, and standing your ground. About 2 weeks ago, I-32F was in a horrific car accident. Another car hit me on my way home from work, flipping my car over. The paramedic said I was incredibly lucky to be alive. I ended up needing emergency surgery for internal bleeding, 2 cracked ribs, and a damaged leg. Spent a week in the hospital recovering, trying to process everything. It was tough, both mentally and physically. All I wanted was for my parents to come see me. I figured they'd rush right over as soon as they heard. Even if they couldn't stay long, a visit would have meant the world. But they were absent for days. I waited for them to show up, or at least call, but nothing. It was 4 days before I even got a text. The hospital did tell them what happened. They're my emergency contacts, and the hospital called them multiple times the day after I was admitted. The nurses even mentioned my parents seemed pretty unconcerned. That obviously stung, but I tried to rationalize it, thinking maybe they were just busy. My phone thankfully survived the crash, so I kept texting them every 5 or 6 hours. Still no reply. Every day in that hospital felt like a nightmare. I desperately wanted to see familiar faces. But the silence from my parents was deafening. The golden child versus my near-death experience. Luckily, I wasn't completely alone. Friends from other states managed to get in touch with family members living nearby. On my 6th day, a family friend visited. She casually mentioned how amazing it was that my brother was getting an award. I had no idea what she was talking about. She filled me in, looking confused that I was out of the loop. That's when it hit me. My parents didn't come to see me because they were at my brother's award ceremony. They knew I was in the hospital, but they chose his special occasion. Over-supporting me during a difficult time, they were so wrapped up in his big event that they barely even bothered to check on me. His ceremony and their image clearly mattered more than their injured daughter. Let me be clear. I'm not jealous of my brother. I totally get why they're proud of him. He's talented and works hard, but he's always been the golden child. Since we were kids, he's been praised for everything, while I've largely been overlooked. He's super successful now, so this award was a big deal for him. However, I was recovering from surgery. A visit, or even a simple phone call, was the absolute least they could have done. All I wanted was for them to care about me. They didn't even bat an eye when I could have died that day. I was furious and humiliated. Their response, "You're just an afterthought." Unable to make sense of their actions, I decided to confront them. I texted them, expressing my disbelief that they prioritized my brother's award over my well-being and how hurt I was that they didn't even check in. I didn't have to wait long for a reply. Honestly, I wish they hadn't responded. Their words just made things worse. At first, they tried to defend themselves, claiming my brother's award was a once-in-a-lifetime achievement they couldn't miss. I pointed out that if they'd bothered to visit me sooner, they wouldn't have missed anything. Eventually, they gave up arguing. Their final blow. It was pointless to waste time visiting me when my brother was out there making the family proud. That hurt more than words can express. It felt like I was just an afterthought. I wish I could say their behavior surprised me, but it's always been this way. My brother was perfect. Every action, every accomplishment, scholarships, fancy jobs, perfect grades, was celebrated. Meanwhile, I was constantly in the background. Nothing I did was ever good enough. Every mistake was a disaster, and I never received the same support. It felt like they'd already decided I was a failure, and nothing I did would change their minds. The scam, the bail. In my refusal a week after my brother's award ceremony, my parents unexpectedly showed up at the hospital. I was confused. After our last conversation, I'd given up on them. I knew them well enough to know they weren't there out of concern. Their blatant disregard for my near-death experience was offensive enough. I didn't need their phony pity. It didn't take long for my mom to break down in tears. My brother had been arrested for fraud at his company. Turns out, he was at the center of a massive fraud scheme. He'd been siphoning company funds into his personal investments by falsifying accounts. After an internal investigation, everything was turned over to the police, and he was arrested. He's facing serious charges like wire fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. My parents had apparently already spent a ton of money on lawyers for him and didn't have enough left for his bail. They came to me asking me to use my savings from my job as a project manager at an IT company to help him out. Even asked if I knew anyone who could pull some strings. I felt like I was just a tool to clean up my brother's mess. Not there. Daughteri was still in pain, both mentally and physically. It was unbelievable that they'd turned to me for help after everything. It felt like a slap in the face. When I was scared and alone in a hospital bed after surgery, they didn't care. But now that their favorite child was in trouble, they needed me. A part of me felt bad, wondering if I should help for the sake of family, but the other part was furious. Why should I save the same brother who's always had everything handed to him? My parents have always protected him. He's never faced consequences. And now they expected me to do the same. I told them no, said. Even if I had the money, I wouldn't feel obligated to help. I reminded them exactly who they cared about more, and that they hadn't even come to see me. They insisted I was being selfish, saying family should stick together. I couldn't bring myself to care, even when they said I'd regret it. Honestly, my brother has always taken precedence over me. I was never enough, no matter how hard I tried. They wanted me to just forget all the times they ignored me, left me, out, and made me feel unimportant. But now that they needed something from me, I felt in control for the first time in my life, and I wasn't letting that go. The confrontation and the faludium lying in my hospital bed right now, feeling a mix of anger and something like peace. My parents haven't spoken to me since I said no, and I know they're upset. But I simply can't bring myself to care anymore. I'm done trying to gain their approval. I've wasted too much time. Am I the villain for standing up to my parents after everything they've done and not helping my brother? They keep repeating that family should always remain together, so I feel like I might be. But I just can't get over how they've treated me throughout my life, especially now. I feel like I've had enough, but I'm not sure what to do next. Update 1. The doorstep assault. Hey everyone. I wanted to thank you all for the support on my initial post. I didn't expect to update so quickly. But a lot has happened. I was finally discharged from the hospital a few days after my parents' visit. I can walk with crutches due to my leg fracture, and breathing is still tough as my ribs heal. I was so looking forward to going home, finding some peace and escaping the turmoil. That hope vanished the moment I saw my parents waiting outside my door. They must have called the hospital to find out my discharge time because I certainly didn't tell them. They wasted no time. Before I could even get my keys out, they started hammering me. They were enraged, telling me I'd gone too far. By not helping my brother, I've never seen them so angry. They seemed more upset with me for refusing than they were about my brother's actual fraud. They droned on about how family always comes first, calling me selfish and vindictive. They claimed I was using this as revenge because I resented my brother. They didn't care that I was still recovering from a near-death experience a week prior. They just saw me as an obstacle to their beloved son's rescue. They even had the nerve to say this was my opportunity to step up and show I wasn't a letdown. They essentially admitted I wasn't really family, and helping my brother was the only way I could make amends. Things really escalated when I told them outright that I wouldn't do it. My mother started crying at my door, screaming things like, "We've already lost one child, and now we're going to lose two. And you're punishing us for loving him more." My dad, on the other hand, just got angrier. He wasn't trying to shame me. He just repeatedly accused me of being cold-hearted and self-centered, saying I had no regard for the family and that I'd regret it once they were gone. Honestly, it was everything I could do not to lose it. I was already exhausted from the hospital, stay and struggling on my crutches, yet I was being told I was a bad person for not cleaning up my brother's mess. The fact that my parents intentionally treated my brother better and loved him more just made it worse. But I didn't back down. I warned them I'd call the police if they didn't leave, and that I wouldn't pay a dime for his bail or legal bills. After that, they finally backed off. But not before insulting me one last time. Update 2. The truth about the scam, a few days after that onslaught at my door. My brother's case made headlines. Turns out, the fraud was far more extensive than we initially thought. The police found evidence he'd been transferring company funds for over a year, some of it laundered through fake business accounts in his name. Plus, as part of a broader investigation, they discovered he'd helped several colleagues hide their embezzled funds. Now my brother is also being charged with conspiracy and money laundering. He could be facing a significant amount of time behind bars if convicted. The fallout has been severe. My parents are completely freaked out. My brother's reputation is utterly destroyed after they'd boasted about his accomplishments to everyone. They knew for years people aren't buying their attempts to control the narrative by claiming it's all a misunderstanding. My dad even lost a major client when word spread about his son being involved in a huge fraud case. A fumbling and clearly don't know what to do. Naturally, they came stumbling back to me. This time, they made no effort to conceal their desperation. They said they just needed my help this once to get through this because they were under so much stress. They insisted that if I helped my brother, they'd have a chance to fix things and keep the family together. That meant keeping the family together meant preserving the illusion that their perfect kid had done nothing wrong. And fixing things meant hiding his transgressions. After I told them no once more, they've gone completely silent. No texts, no calls. They seem to have given up on me. To be honest, they probably see me as a hopeless failure who abandoned the family when they needed her most. But you know what? I no longer give a damn. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm in charge. It hurts to know my parents just saw me as a fallback, someone to control if something went wrong. However, it also feels fantastic to put myself first for once and finally say no to appease them. I won't help my brother. And I won't let them use guilt to get me to fix a situation they started. They now have to deal with the consequences of their decisions. Update 3. A shocking revelation and a new family. Since many of you have been asking about my condition, the truth is, things have gotten even more complicated. It was my brother who sent me an email. Since he doesn't have access to a phone in jail, he convinced one of his friends, who still maintains his innocence, to contact me on his behalf. I was initially tempted to just delete it without reading. I assumed it was another guilt trip. Curiosity got the best of me, and I opened it. In the email, my brother claimed he was being framed. While he vowed he wasn't the mastermind, he admitted he was part of the fraud. He claims the higher-ups used him as a scapegoat to hide their own wrongdoing. He even said that while he's trapped taking the fall, certain powerful executives are still free. He pleaded for my help, not for our parents, but because he believed I was the only one who could save the family from disintegrating entirely. That last line really got to me. Maybe it was because my brother finally admitted how toxic our parents have been. He acknowledged that they've consistently mistreated me and used him to stroke their egos. Seeing him admit that was odd, since he'd always played along. However, I couldn't shake the feeling he was just saying whatever he thought would convince me to help. He also used the same save the family line my parents had been using since this whole fiasco began. I kept asking myself if there was any truth to what he was saying, even though I promised myself I was done with all of this. Could it be that he was actually being set up? What if I was wrong about how big this was? Okay, part of me wanted to know for sure, so I decided to investigate. I talked to a lawyer friend I trusted. Since they weren't involved in the case, they couldn't give me a full legal breakdown, but they did offer guidance on where to find more information. After some research, I discovered my brother's story wasn't entirely untrue. There was no doubt he was a fraudster, but from what I understood, it appeared he wasn't the one controlling everything. Evidently, he wasn't the only one involved in the fraud scheme. My brother was used as a pawn by several high-level executives who had been transferring corporate funds for years. Since he was responsible for overseeing specific accounts, he was held solely responsible when things went south. My brother was left holding the bag because these superiors had purposefully distanced themselves from the grunt work. I felt torn after learning all of this. On one hand, he was involved in something so shady in the first place, whether he was the mastermind or just a pawn. He wasn't an innocent bystander. He went along with it because he knew what he was doing, likely believing he'd never get caught. However, I did feel a little sorry for him. It's tough knowing he was exploited by those with more power and expertise in hiding their trails. Obvious those executives were well versed in their roles and made sure my brother would bear the brunt of any negative outcomes. I couldn't help but wonder how things might have turned out if he hadn't been raised in a household that encouraged him to take shortcuts as long as you were successful on the outside. He most likely believed he was untouchable because of our parents' unceasing protection and adoration. My folks were unexpectedly silent when I told them what I'd discovered. Although they didn't want to admit it, I believe they secretly understood. My brother wasn't an innocent victim. They persisted in promoting the same narrative, claiming I was selfish for not prioritizing the family and callous for not assisting him, rather than admitting the reality. It was like speaking to a brick wall. I've decided to stop interacting with them at this point. I've made up my mind, and I'm sticking with it. No matter how much he wants to blame the executives, my brother still made his bed, and now he has to lie in it. My parents are at fault if they wish to continue supporting him. If the situations were reversed, I wouldn't ruin myself trying to help someone who wouldn't do anything for me. To be honest, I haven't felt this at ease in a long time. Even though my family will never believe it, I know I made the right decision. I've been treated like I didn't matter for far too long, and I'm sick of it. Although my brother's predicament is awful, I am not responsible for fixing it. Once again, I want to thank everyone who has helped me along the way. Although it hasn't been simple, it's been a huge comfort to know that I'm not the only one who feels this way. Final update. Finding freedom in a new family. It's been over a month since my last post, and I have enough information to give you. All a final update. I'll start with what my parents did when they realized insulting me and pleading with me wouldn't work. They decided to make my life even more miserable. They contacted several of my aunts, uncles, and cousins to spread their disdain for me, painting me as selfish for not helping my brother. They made it seem like my refusal was motivated by spite and that I was just sitting on a pile of money. They told everyone I was a monster and shouldn't be trusted. I only learned the truth when one of my cousins contacted me, informing me my parents were spreading nasty rumors. They cleverly omitted the fact that they left me in the hospital and hadn't contacted me since, completely twisting the tale to make it seem like I was harboring resentment, that I was only ever called to help my brother. I was hurt at first. Even though I'd defended myself, it felt like I was being punished again. I thought I'd be left on my own, with no one to support me. However, something unexpected happened. Several distant relatives started contacting me, not to support my parents, but to support me. Turns out, my parents' treatment of others and their constant favoritism towards my brother caused them to burn a lot of bridges over the years. I had no idea how deep this went. I started hearing stories from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, and honestly, they were all more startling than the last. One aunt told me my brother once borrowed a substantial amount of money from her husband to invest in a business venture. Naturally, the plan failed, and my parents completely cut ties with my aunt when she tried to get her money back. They even spread rumors that my aunt was greedy and unsupportive of her family. According to another cousin, my brother blamed a parking lot attendant for my uncle's car crash at a family gathering a few years ago. To keep the family from being embarrassed, my parents supported him and made sure the rumor didn't get out. They accused my uncle of trying to damage my brother's reputation when he tried to address them about it. There were several examples like this, where my parents either covered up my brother's wrongdoing or silenced anyone who dared to speak up. One relative even told me my brother and another family member had a business partnership, but my parents ruined it because they believed the relative wasn't renowned enough to be associated with their son. It was both startling and reassuring. To hear all of this, I wasn't insane. It's true that my parents have a long history of ignoring others and hiding behind my brother. For a long time, I believed I was somehow to blame for their treatment of me. Maybe I wasn't good enough or didn't live up to their standards. But it was never about me. As I see now, they constantly wanted to keep my brothers safe at any cost. They even avoided family members who questioned them or got in their way. For those wondering why my parents were so desperate for my help, it's because I've built a strong life for myself despite their lack of encouragement. I've developed great relationships and managed my finances wisely. As a project manager for a reputable IT company, I've saved money and made prudent investments. My parents knew I had the money, which is why they were so frantic. They failed to realize, however, that I didn't want to help just because I could, especially not for those who have treated me like an afterthought my whole life. there's been an update on my brother's case. My parents eventually scraped together enough cash from loans and favors to get him out of jail after I refused to bail him out. However, the investigation was far from over. A few weeks ago, my brother decided to cooperate with the authorities. From what I understand, he provided information about the higher-ups who were complicit in the scam, which helped the prosecution's progress. As a result of his cooperation, he received a lighter sentence. He'll serve a year and then perform community service instead of years in prison. To be honest, that doesn't make me feel any better. His cooperation is commendable, but that doesn't change the fact that he initially chose to participate in the plot. Furthermore, I don't think this event will significantly alter my brother. I don't think he'll stop having my parents clean up his messes anytime soon. For my part, I've decided to permanently cut off contact with my parents, which I probably should have done a long time ago. They are blocked on all my platforms. I even instructed the front desk of my building to deny them entry if they returned without warning. I'm tired of serving as their fallback option, scapegoat, or emotional target. I can now live my life without having to constantly compare myself to my brother or beg for scraps of affection from people who would never show it to me. The family members who got in touch have been incredible. It's weird because after years of my parents excluding me, I've unexpectedly found a family. In fact, I'm excited to get to know these relatives better, because many of them have invited me to family events where my parents won't be present. One of my aunts even expressed regret for not recognizing the situation sooner. She claimed that although she always thought something wasn't right with the way my parents treated me, she kept quiet because she didn't want to start a fight. She is now one of my biggest supporters, along with a few other family members. For the first time, I feel hopeful. Even though it hasn't been easy, it feels so amazing to finally feel like I'm in charge of my life. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.